Here's another viewer question. And this business about falling in love with Thailand is very common, and it's something that I can relate to too. I first went to Thailand in 1987. It was a very different country to what it is now, and I absolutely fell in love with the place. And during my working life, I travelled quite a lot, went to lots of countries, and I returned to Thailand several times. And Thailand was always my favourite place. And it got to 2002, and my job had turned into a bit of a nightmare. I didn't like the political environment in the UK with the Blair government. And in fact, I got fed up with all aspects of the UK, and I was probably heading for some kind of nervous breakdown. So I decided to leave and go to another country. And I didn't even have to think about where to go. I knew immediately that it would be Thailand. Living in Thailand and vacationing in Thailand are two very different things. If you go to Thailand for a vacation and have a great time, and you think that by going to live in Thailand, life will just be a permanent vacation, you're very wrong. It doesn't work out like that. Lots of people who think that way run into problems. They end up either going home, and there are even some foreigners in Thailand that end up living on the streets begging for money. There's no welfare system as such, and even if there was, foreigners wouldn't be entitled to use it. It's very difficult to find work that pays a decent amount of money, and if you rely on income from abroad, fluctuations in exchange rates can really kill you, as I found out for the last 4 years. Many foreigners would like to go and live in Thailand, but at the same time, there are many Thais who would love the opportunity to go and live somewhere else, and there are reasons for that. It's not a bad country. It's given me a good life, and it's given me the family that I would never have had if I stayed in the UK. But most tourists don't understand Thailand at all. Some think they do, but they don't. So my advice is, before you burn too many bridges, do as much research as you can, otherwise you might find that you come very unstuck. The first thing about learning the language is to be realistic. I've answered a few questions on Quora about Thailand, so they send me emails with other questions. And one girl wanted to know what the best way was to learn Thai in 10 days. Well, I've been at this for about 17 years. I read and speak Thai every day. My wife's not very good at English, so the language of communication in our marriage is Thai. I speak to her in Thai, and I still struggle. My 9-year-old daughter overtook me a few years ago with her Thai ability, and I still have problems making myself understood quite often. So what I'm saying here is, if you're not making progress after 6 months, don't worry. That's perfectly normal. It takes everyone a very long time, and you've just got to keep going at it. Here's my next piece of advice, and I know this will scare a lot of people, but the transliteration system is so horrendous that it will actually hinder you more than it helps you. When I first arrived in Thailand, I signed up for a 20-hour course with a local Thai teacher, and that was just sort of get me going with the spoken language. And she asked me, would I like to learn to read as well? And that question terrified me. You know, learning the spoken language was daunting enough without having to learn a completely new script. So I said no, just the spoken language, but it's actually wrong. And I would suggest that you learn both at the same time. Transliteration does have a purpose. This year has been something of an exception, but normally millions of tourists visit Thailand and none of them can read Thai. So if they all went to the airport and there was no transliteration and all the destinations were in Thai, they wouldn't know what plane to get on, and it would be absolute chaos. So some kind of transliteration system is necessary. However, for the purpose of language learning, it simply isn't fit for purpose. Let's look at this Thai word here and the transliteration. The word in Thai says Julalongkorn, and the initial consonant is the Georgian, which makes a J sound, but it's transliterated with a CH, and this is quite common. And the final syllable, the transliteration is a K, and the initial consonant is actually the Gorgai, which is like a hard G sound, as in like gate or girl. I could give you thousands of other examples where the transliteration of a Thai word is simply wrong. Now, it could be made better, but there are reasons why it can never be perfect. Now, we could change that CH to a J, which would be better for English speakers. But if I was a German, a J in German makes a Y sound, ja, and in French it makes a kind of ZH sound, je suis. So even if I changed it, depending on a person's native language, they would see J as a completely different sound. And Gorgai is always transliterated into K, but it's not a K sound, it's a hard G sound. But if an English speaker looks at a G, how do they know if it's the hard G, as in gorilla, or the soft G, as in giraffe? It's just very, very confusing. Furthermore, there are sounds in Thai that simply don't exist in English. With the word I've written at the top, that's quite easy and unambiguous to transliterate. Bin, it means to fly. But what about the word at the bottom? This uses the long sound. This is glur, which means salt. Now, that sound doesn't exist in English. So how am I supposed to write that in English? It's just very, very confusing. I know it sounds very daunting to start learning a new spoken language and a new script, but transliteration will cause so many problems down the line. This is why I tell people to avoid it. The best way, to my way of thinking, is to learn to write and speak at the same time. Take it very slowly and have realistic expectations. Don't be like the girl on Quora who thought that you could learn Thai in 10 days. You won't learn it in 10 days, you won't learn it in a month, you won't learn it in a year. Just take it slow and steady, realise it's going to take a long time, but learn in the correct way, not the quickest way. In Thailand, you will hear certain common phrases all the time. The equivalent to "how are you?" how you doing is "Gin khao riyang?" like "have you eaten rice yet?" You will hear this all the time. So with these common phrases, listen to a native speaker. Don't listen to someone like me who gives you bad tones and bad pronunciation. Listen to a Thai. Ask the Thai person to write down the words and then match the sound that you hear from the Thai person to the written word. What you need to avoid doing is writing the sound you hear using the English alphabet. It's unnecessary, it's misleading, and eventually it will cause you problems. With the spoken language, I always recommend learning from a native Thai speaker, but it's different with the written language. I've talked about this a bit on previous videos, and it's all to do with the Thai education system, a lot of rote learning. So Thais are taught how, but they're not taught why. So if you ask them a why question, most of the time they can't answer. Foreigners like me, who have been through the process of learning to read Thai, can probably explain to other foreigners who are learning to read Thai a lot better than Thais. You'll find all of the vowel and consonant basics on the tutorials that I did previously on this channel. If you can't find the answer to your question, feel free to drop me a line or ask another foreigner who's been through the process of learning how to read Thai. Learning to read Thai is definitely a marathon, not a sprint. But to anyone who's determined enough to learn, you can do it. It's within the ability of anyone who is prepared to put in a bit of effort and is realistic enough to know that it's going to take quite a long time. Thanks again for watching. If you have any comments, questions or suggestions, please leave them below, and there should be another video fairly soon.